Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Sit down. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Yeah, there we go. I know that the last person before lunch, so in some ways I'm a barrier, but I'm hoping that you'll think of me more as a transition, and that I'll be able to share some things with you that might enrich your experience here at the conference. I'm really honored. I really feel humbled and grateful to be here. For those who know me, I'm even excited, and you know that I don't demonstrate that very often. But I'm really excited to be here to share with you what we're doing at Point Blue. I'm really excited to share the stage with Alan and Harrison and Larry. There's some common themes there that I didn't expect that will be reiterated in my presentation. And so with that, I think we'll get going. So I'll do this with introduction of Point Blue Conservation Science, who we are, where we came from. Talk a little bit about our Rangeland Watershed initiative that started a little over 6 years ago, almost 7 years ago now. Our evolving partner biologist model that I'm really anxious to share with those who are interested in that particular attribute of our work. Our Rangeland Monitoring Network, which doesn't happen often enough, I don't believe, on working lands, is, you know, do we really monitor for objectives? Do we really monitor to course correct? And then finally, talk a little bit about our intention of cultivating and building Leopoldian land stewards and the characteristics and the techniques that we have developed related to that. So we are Point Blue Conservation Science. We started out as Point Reyes Bird Observatory about 52 years ago at Point Reyes in a little north of San Francisco in California. We now have a budget of about $14 million a year. We're a private nonprofit. We have about 150 seasonal and permanent scientists and staff. We have an informatics group that manages over 1 billion pieces of data. A lot of that's bird data that started with Point Reyes Bird Observatory. And we work from Alaska to the Antarctic. We just sent our team down to the Antarctic looking at some questions related to Adelie penguins in Antarctica. That work's been going on for over 2 decades. And then in California, we work from the Sierra to the sea. So our executive director has really worked to help us focus our efforts in what we call climate smart conservation. And we know, if anybody's paying attention at all, climate change is really creating a lot of challenges in our world. And we want to be and are active on that front, where we work with producers, landowners, partners of all kinds to employ climate smart conservation on the land. Our vision is to become, because of our collaborative climate smart conservation actions today, healthy ecosystems will sustain thriving wildlife and human communities well to the future. That's our kind of mantra and motto. And our strategic goal in the next, over this current period that we're in, is climate smart conservation will be implemented and assessed across all Point Blue areas, and lessons learned will be disseminated globally. Our executive director, Ellie Cohen, is currently in Bonn at the climate talks there. And one of the things that she learned, and I hope I don't mess this up a little bit, but the greenhouse gases aren't primarily the result of livestock, which is something that's been a mantra for a lot of people for a long time, but rather from energy production right here in the United States. So our Rangeland Watershed Initiative is something, again, like we developed almost 7 years ago, and it intends to increase water, carbon, wildlife, and economic productivity on California rangelands. California rangelands, depending on who you talk to, depending on what your definition of rangeland is anywhere from 40 to 60 million acres. And in California is a state of about 100 million acres. So we have a lot of opportunity to work on a lot of lands that can really be a tremendous hedge against climate change, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. The setting for our watershed project is right now we're working about 25 counties in California. We've got, I think, 58 counties in California. We work in roughly half of those. We work in very different kinds of geographies and climates. We have everything from our coastal maritime climates to our wet and dry Mediterranean climates, and then we get over into the other side of California, the Great Basin side of California. We have our Great Basin continental climates, and then further south we have desert climates. And so those variations in temperature and moisture create some terms in California that I think are kind of unique to the state, things like tule fog and earthquake weather and things like, what other weather and climate terms do we have that are unusual?
Santa Ana winds.
Pineapple Express is another one. Those of California know what that one is when we get El Nino and water funnels in from Hawaii and drenches the state when we're not in drought. That's another thing that we have. Marine layer, everybody along the coast knows what the marine layer is in the summertime. It lays in and keeps things cool and wet. May gray, June gloom, that's another coast term about the fog that rolls in as a response to the heat in the valley. So just give you real quickly some of our the setting for what we're looking at in terms of photographs. This is a photograph of a coast, that's Tamales Bay, the water body that you see there. This is some more coastal rangelands that we work on. We get into the Central Valley, the Mediterranean climate. It's kind of the opposite of what you have here. We have cool, wet winters that turn California green, and then we have hot, dry summers. And California gets the name Golden State, not because of the gold that was discovered there, but because the vegetation turns this nice gold before it washes into brown later into the summertime. So we're the Golden State as a result of our vegetation, not as a result of gold discovery. And we're talking a little bit earlier about functional groups, about sedges, rushes, grasses, legumes, forbs. In California, as John Muir and others described it earlier, the array of colors there really kind of speak to the kind of vegetative diversity that we enjoy in the state, but that has been really degraded in many senses up and down the state. As we move up out of the valley and into what we call the bathtub ring around the Great Central Valley of California, which is the Sacramento and San Joaquin valleys, about 400 miles long in the middle of the state. It's our, California's breadbasket, well known for production of food, agriculture. We get blue oaks ringing the valley area around the Central Valley. And again, as it turns golden brown, we see some different colors. We move up into the Sierras and into the Coast Range. We get into deciduous forests. We're working with livestock producers in those belts. We also then get up into the mountain meadows of the Sierras, and we're doing extensive work there to restore those mountain meadows for productivity, both for livestock production and also for wildlife habitat, and probably most importantly for water storage, to reinvigorate those sponges that once were there that have been degraded over time. And then as we get up and over the mountain and into the eastern part of the state, the Modoc Plateau, which is northeastern California, we get into the sage steppe. And in that part of the world, we work with a number of ranchers that are some of the larger ranchers that we work with in California. Our Rangeland Watershed Initiative was predicated on a project in Upper Stony Creek, and Upper Stony Creek is in Glenn and Butte counties, and you'll see in the middle of this photograph there's a little mountain range there. It's called the Sutter Buttes, which is about, 70, 80 miles north of Sacramento. So just to give you a sense of where that was, it was in Glenn and Butte counties. And in those areas, we, ranchers, when I was with the NRCS back in the early 80s, came to us and said, we really have some issues with our productivity and with keeping livelihood going here on the land. And so as we looked at it, we saw some things that we thought might be symptoms of what was their overall problem of loss of productivity. And here's where Bree and I get into our conversations about compaction. We developed a term called a cowpan, where that surface layer of soil has been compacted. And again, the conversations Bree and I get into about compaction and the cause of compaction, really occurs in our part of the world because livestock are on the land when they need to be. That's when there's water and when there is moisture and the grass is growing. But it's also not the most opportune time for the soil, because if you want to compact something, what do? If you're constructing a property or you're building a levee or something, how do you compact something? Yeah, you get it wet, you put a sheep's foot on it. And I'm going to guess a lot of people in here have been stepped on by a cow or horse or sheep, right? Okay. What? You haven't? There we go. We got a few ranchers in here. Okay. Yeah, so the point of that is you got big-bodied animals with very small feet. And every time that they take a step, you're talking about somewhere between 400 and 600 pounds per square inch that they're applying on the land. Okay? So that compaction has occurred over time. It continues to be a symptom in California, and it has caused us to have watersheds. And that soil surface compaction also results in the background here, you see these gullies. Shouldn't be gullies on land that's almost that flat. Why is that? It's because the water's looking for a new place to go, because the old water regimes have been adjusted because of physical properties on the soil. We have simplified our plant communities. We used to have a lot more perennials than we do now, both grasses, sedges, rushes, forbs, legumes. And that was a loss in forage production. That also created ineffective precipitation because rainfall is running off instead of going into the ground. So we've effectively, in many cases in California, created a tabletop which should have been a sponge. So in Upper Stony Creek, we started with looking at some of our first and second order streams with grazing management. We did some things like Bill Zedek is doing as an activity. We didn't know he was doing that. We were doing this back in the 80s and early 90s, doing little small rock drops. The picture on the right here is this same location in October of I don't know, Madonna does. She keeps it over here when she's dancing around. Here we go. There we go. Okay, so the photograph on the right is that same location in October of 1992, about 6 years after we put those in. First order stream, all we did was change grazing management. Got water 365 days. Granted, it's not a rushing river, but it's 365-day water. And so what did it result in? That's that same first order stream. Cottonwoods, willows, alders came in. That's 8 years later. And in other parts, you'll see this little mountain tip here. You can see on the left, the stream has not been worked with prescriptive grazing, and the one on the right has been. So we were able to really see some big changes in Upper Stony. But one thing we didn't do is we did not quantify it. And so when I came to Point Blue to offer our Rangeland Watershed initiative a place to live and a place to try, we said, let's make sure that we have monitoring so we can really quantify effects. We see it, observational science is just as valid as empirical science, but there are those out there, as we all know, unless it's in a paper somewhere, they don't believe it. So we want to quantify some of the work that we're seeing. Another thing that we are really invested in is making sure that what we do is ecologically sound. So in California, like a lot of the United States, during the Pleistocene, we had chronicled at least 18 large herbivores: mastodons, mammoths, rhinos, horses, camels, sloths. And they were moved around by at least 5 different kinds of predators. Same things like saber-toothed tigers, short-faced bears, dire wolves, American cheetahs. Okay, so you had this predator-prey relationship. And then along about 15,000 years or so ago came Native Americans. And for those people who don't think that Pleistocene ecology applies today, you need to think about how long those plants have been in California, how long those plants have co-evolved with other kinds of flora and fauna that are there. But if you don't believe that, if you think it's more recent, then take a look at what's on the state flag of California. Everybody know what that is? Not just a bear. Grizzly bear. Yeah. So if you've ever seen what a grizzly bear does to the land, they're not gentle on the land. They disturb things. And when they are looking for groceries, whether it's tearing apart a downed tree for grubs, whether it's going after some ground-dwelling mammal, or whether it's knocking down an elk, they make their presence known. And we also had 3 different kinds of elk herds. We had Tule elk, we had Roosevelt elk, we had Rocky Mountain elk. We also had mule deer and black-tailed deer. We had pronghorn antelope. We had gray wolves. So we had, to a smaller extent, the same kind of predator-prey relationship working on our landscapes. But as I mentioned, we also had a really high density of Native Americans. And we had some of the highest density of cultural and linguistic groups in the United States, if not the world at that time. Kat Anderson is an ethnobotanist. She wrote a book called Understanding the Land, or she wrote a book called Before the Wilderness and Tending the Wild. And she took the titles from those books from Native American women that she worked with, who said, before Europeans got here, there was no wilderness because we had to tend every acre out there. And so in that process, they were able to coppice, cultivate, dig. There was at least 12 different agronomic practices that Native Americans in California applied to the land for their cultural needs for basketry. And they used a lot of materials for their baskets, and so that means that they really extensively managed the land. Why that's important is because every tribe had somewhere between 15 and 30 baskets a year. Every basket had between 7 and 30,000 pieces of plant material that couldn't have nodes. So that means plant materials that were first-year growth, right? So how do you get that much plant material? Well, you really work the land. So our focus is managing the soil surface. And we all know that the division of soils on the left that don't have a lot of cover, that have weeds, Alan, and the ones on the right are really what we're looking for, with more diverse grasses, more soil cover. And a little bit of soil 101, there's more species of plant and animal in a shovel full of good garden soil than there is in the entire Amazon. Let that roll around your head for a minute. That's pretty amazing. So healthy soil, do we know what it is? No, but I think we can start getting an idea because you can smell it, you can feel it, you can as you walk across it, and it's sponginess, you can touch it. So we're really working with producers to try to invigorate and encourage soil health. And we really want to work with producers to change vocabulary, because water catchment is really a preferable type of term than shed. If you look at any kind of college course, irrigation and drainage, everybody wants to drain the water off. They want to get it off, get it off, get it off. We want to hold it. We want to reinvigorate that sponge. We want to hold that water and be jealous of every drop that falls, whether it's rain, whether it's snow, whether it's dew, whether it's fog. We have 4 different kinds of moisture in California. We want to take advantage of all 4 types. One of the things that's really, I think, an underestimated or under thought about attribute of climate change is photosynthesis. And I put this up here, kind of remind you of your high school sophomore biology class where you went through photosynthesis. So what is it? It's carbon dioxide and water vapor taken into the plant in the presence of sunlight. Well, what are 2 of our most problematic greenhouse gases? CO2 and water vapor, okay? And the plant builds sugars. The plant holds the sugars in the plants, and the plant exudes those sugars down into the soil profile, sequestering carbon, and gives off oxygen. So that green plant really kicking tail and photosynthesizing instead of being, in uncompacted soils and maybe taking too much herbivories taken off of it and it's struggling with brixes of 2 or 3. We saw what difference that makes when you have healthy soil and you get brixes up to 25%. That's a lot of difference, not only in production, but also in production of your carbon sequestration. So, even though there's a paper out of Holland that disputes some of the figures that the Department of Agriculture, Iowa State, and Michigan State put out about carbon levels increasing water holding capacity, until I see something that tells me by what I see on the land that that's not the truth. I'm still going to hold to that the increase of soil organic matter does increase water holding capacity in the soil. And that really is a kind of a key part of the work that we do, is we really want to increase that soil organic matter so we can hold that water in the soil profile. So if those figures are true, that 1% of soil organic matter holds 16,000 gallons more water, that every 20 acres is another acre full of water in the soil. That's really powerful. That really gives landowners flexibility that they don't otherwise have. And of course, we've seen this photograph before, the bioscience looking at the root masses of perennial grasses versus annual grasses. So we know that below ground biomass production is really tremendously valuable. That these roots, they grow, they proliferate, they die, they create pore space for air, water, and nutrients to move through. That's really a powerful activity in the land. We also know what herbivory does to the plants, and that rest is something that we really need to consider just as much as herbivory itself. Our model is that we're working with a series of young partner biologists, and our partner biologists can be found just about anywhere in the United States. Most states have them. Unfortunately, New Mexico does not, to my knowledge, have one. We in Point Blue have about 15 partner biologists. They are nested in the NRCS field offices. We have a contribution agreement with the NRCS, where the NRCS pays us to help them with their technical assistance to get Conservation Farm Bill on the land. And one of the things we think about with our partner biologists is something a little bit different than others do. Other than just delivering conservation programs, we train them and mentor them to be land doctors. So what did Leopold mean when he said, once you learn to read the land, I have no fear of what you will do with it, do to it or with it, and I know many pleasant things it will do for you. What do you mean by that? We've really taken that seriously and think about what is a land doctor? Is it really any different than a medical doctor? So all of you out here, all of us have 10 systems, right? We got a skeletal system, we got a muscular, we got a circulatory, digestive, ad nauseum. The earth has systems as well. Tell me, what's a couple of systems the earth has? Water cycle, yeah, there's one, there's a big one. All the nutrient cycles, nitrogen, phosphorus, carbon, succession, pollination, photosynthesis, energy flow. So the earth has a lot of systems as well. Do we look at the earth in terms of systems? When we go out and read the land, when we engage all 5 of our senses, our eyes, our ears, our sense of taste sometimes, what we feel when we're walking, do we really think about the land in terms of systems? So we're trying to do that. We're trying to create the land doctor that Leopold talks about. So we have 50 of these partner biologists. Right now, these are the counties in California, the green counties where they're employed. They're in NRCS field offices there. Most of those counties are predominantly rangeland. We've engaged over 800 landowners so far on over 500,000 acres. They have helped deliver over $17 million in Farm Bill money, primarily things like fences, water developments, range seeding, prescribed burning, prescribed grazing. And the other thing that we do is we do biological and ecological monitoring. I'll talk a little bit more about that. We are also working in 11 of the most poor counties in California. So just to give you an idea of where partner biologists are, as I mentioned, New Mexico right now doesn't seem to have partner biologists, but a lot of the other western states do. Our model is a little different because we really talk about these partner biologists as being much more than just another biological position in the field office. They're value added. They bring to the field office something that a typical partner biologist does not. We require that they be invested in the community, that they go and be involved with cattlemen's, that they're involved with wool growers, that they're involved with community symphony, that they're involved with the county fairs, that they're involved with Audubon. And they're integrating themselves in the community. In some ways you could argue that they're community organizers because there are things that are evolving as a consequence of their action and their interaction in the community that probably wouldn't happen otherwise. 25% of the time is devoted to effectiveness monitoring. We'll talk about that in a minute. And they all have to be certified NRCS conservation planners. They all have to know how to use the NRCS tools. They have to know how to use the assessments. They have to use the conservation practice standards. They all have to know how to do contracting and all that part of it. But they also do the monitoring. They do things in the community that otherwise partner biologists don't do in other organizations. So they work with the NRCS with the conservation management practices. Our whole focus is to work with ranchers to adjust their grazing management, to really encourage that vegetation that we were talking about earlier, to do the kinds of things that we're looking for, to create more soil organic matter, to hold more water, to create more forage. And so using these practice standards, the management practice standards are obvious. Prescribed grazing is the major one, but there's other management practices as well. What they call facilitate practices, so those are practices that facilitate conservation on the land. And then there are accelerating practices, so those are the practices that kind of kick the conservation in the tail. So the prescribed burning and the mechanical treatment, those kinds of things. We're not just managing for forage production, as I mentioned. We're really managing for all of the taxa that need to make a living out there in the land. So whether it's insects, whether it's birds, whether it's small mammals, we're looking at all those things to try to make a living out there, to make that land as welcoming for them and as hospitable for them as possible. So as I mentioned, we're working right now in 25 counties. Difference, I guess, is 80 ranches is our most recent figure, so that reflects the new ranches that we're going to be adding this spring. And you can see the counties where we're located in. And so far we have over 300 locations where we've done soil dynamic property monitoring on, and over 800 where we've done it for birds. So our Rangeland Monitoring Network, we do establish baselines using monitoring to monitor for change. We put together what we call a landowner letter. We put all this information together after we do bird point counts, and we do vegetation transects, we do soil dynamic property readings and data collection. We put that together what we call a landowner letter. And we call it performance monitoring, because where else can you get real-time data, real-time information on your ranch that's been analyzed and presented back to you in less than a year's time. So it's a really valuable tool that our landowners who utilize that information can course correct with their management, or can keep on the course that they're on. And these relationships also help us understand our relationships between these different kinds of metrics that we're measuring. As I mentioned, we're using birds, we're using vegetation, we're looking at soil dynamic properties. We also take grazing information about number of animals, timing, frequency, duration, those kinds of things, the grazing management. This is our conceptual model of what that looks like. We've got it out on our display out there if you want to look at that. The roundtable tomorrow, I'm more than happy to talk a little bit more about this as well. So these are we use standardized protocols. We haven't invented any of them except Jeff Geipel from our group is one of the people who helped develop the bird point count protocol. But the rest of them, Natural Resource Inventory, NRI, the National Soil Survey, these are all techniques that have been used and quantified through other organizations before we started using them. So birds is one of the things that we started as. We really are interested in birds because they tell us by the presence or absence what's going on. So we use bird indicator species we call focal species. So those are species that, if that habitat, the oaks, the riparian, the grassland, if it's in good shape, those common birds ought to be there. And if they're not, it's a red flag. What's going on? Why are they not there? So something like we commonly use the scrub jay. It's the blue bird with the acorn in its mouth. This is an animal architect. And this animal plants between 5,000 and 6,000 acorns a year. And without them, you're not going to get oak regeneration. And without shrubs, you're not going to have scrub jays. So on ranches where we monitor, we see no succession, we see no multiple age classes of oaks. No, by the way, the shrub component's missing. So one of the recommendations would be to get the shrub component back so you can use these animal architects to do the job that they ecologically would fulfill. This is an example, and you'll see these out on the table as well, of the bird focal species. They're laminated. We give them to the ranchers, so we throw them on the dash of their car. If they have questions, we can talk to them about it. We also do the vegetation measurements. We look at functional groups. We look at percent ground cover of bare soil, and we look at the percent of invasive noxious plants. The dynamic properties are those properties of soils that can do change with management over time. So water infiltration is an obvious one. Bulk density, which is a measure of compaction, that's another obvious one. And then soil carbon. And we also, the fourth property that we take measurements of are texture, because you don't want to be comparing a sandy clay to a silty loam. So we do take that stable property as well as these dynamic properties. Let's just give you a little bit of some of our early analysis of some of our soil, and you can see that the Central Coast and the Sacramento Valley are fairly close. The Sac Valley and the San Joaquin Valley are fairly close, but as you get out to the coast where it's wetter and more moist longer, you start to see those carbon values in the soil elevate. And it really does vary with climate, and you can see that these are color-coded by the region. The Sacramento Valley is in the gold, the San Joaquin Valley is in the green, and the coast is in the blue. So you can see those scatter patterns where in the valley where you get less moisture, higher heat in the summertime, versus on the coast where you get fog, you get more moisture. There's real differences in carbon values. One of the other things that we're really excited about that the data is showing us, what probably everybody in this room knows, but it's never been published in a paper, is that the more plant functional groups that you find on the land, so sedges, rushes, grasses, annual forbs, perennial forbs, annual legumes, perennial legumes, the more functional groups of plants, the higher the inherent soil carbon. That the more simple the functional groups, the less soil carbon. So that's exciting that we're actually being able to prove out this concept that we've all known for a long time. So if you want more information about that, we've put together a handbook of field methods. That is available online. We're working with people in Montana. We're working with some other people in California that are using our techniques for their own monitoring that we don't have anything to do with necessarily, but we want to give away what we're learning. And the last thing I want to talk about is our Leopoldian land stewards. And of course, everyone in the room knows who Aldo Leopold was, with San County Almanac, River, Mother of God, and a whole lot of other things. And he put together something that he said can't be written down, and yet he did. In the San County Almanac, the final essay is on the land ethic. And we intentionally, with our funders, let them know that we are going to work with producers to cultivate, encourage, grow Leopoldian land stewards. That's an intention. That one of the things we've heard about today is the heart. You know, we're Point Blue conservation science, so we do a lot of cerebral stuff because we want to quantify, monitor, do the research to prove out concepts. But the heart is just that important companion that really needs to be a part of the whole process. So we, in this network of Leopoldian land stewards, we've engaged with, we encourage them to embrace the land ethic. We know that they're passionate, that they're innovative. When we started this program, we went to the Aldo Leopold Foundation and the San County Foundation. We said, do you have some kind of listing or some kind of document that tells us what a Leopoldian land steward is? Because we have the Leopold Awards that happen all across the country, right? So what's the criteria for that? Well, they don't. It's mostly by essays and mostly by recommendations from people they know. So we've engaged in a process of actually characterizing, giving a, probably not a good word, a profile of what a Leopoldian land steward looks like. And we find that we've come up with almost 40 different attributes that we think define a Leopoldian land steward. So things like they're innovators, they're patient, they are really good listeners, they share, they want other people to be able to know what they're doing. They'll share not only successes, but they'll share failures as well. So if the landowner, as Leopold described in the land ethic, he described most people as falling into the A-B cleavage. Do you remember reading that? Anybody remember the A-B cleavage part of the land ethic? Thanks, Rob. In that essay, he talks about there are basically two kinds of people. There's the A cleavage people and the B cleavage people. The A cleavage people see land as a commodity. It's mine. I'll do what I want with it. I can make it better, or maybe what I do is not making it better, but it's mine. B cleavage people are folks who say, I'm a member of the community of land. It was here before me, it's going to be here after me. I'm going to be a caretaker, and I'm going to do the best job I can of caring for this land. And encouraging that kind of from the heart feeling and passion is really not very difficult. And we've come up with a whole series of techniques, storytelling, being a good listener, walking a mile in their shoes, of creating and cultivating the Leopoldian land steward. They have a long-term view of the land and that sense of responsibility. So the tie here is really pretty easy. It's every rancher out here, every farmer is really familiar with animal husbandry and land husbandry, right? You will do anything you can to save that land, to take care of that cow, to make sure that those animals are not mistreated in any way. You have a passion about caring for those animals. So it's just a little bit of a shift to think about the passion, equating that same passion for the land, okay? It's that feeling with your heart, just as passionately about the land as you feel about your livestock. When you see that erosion, or you see those gullies, or you see things that are going on that might be not for the best of your land, it hurts you. Just like if you see something hurting your livestock, it hurts you. It's very much passion-based. It's very much based in the heart. We think that's a huge part of the work that we do. So I'll close with a couple of stories here that we term aha moments, where we're working with landowners, where we actually see those shifts occurring from being, someone who doesn't really a spouse caring for the land to someone who actually starts caring for the land. So we're working with one of our partner biologists, working with a rancher up in Northern California, and he wanted to go in and clear his brush because he wanted more forage. Older gentleman, and our partner biologists heard this bird that's pictured here is called a wren tit. And it's a little bird, it's pretty nondescript, got a beautiful song. It lives out its entire life and probably in size less than the size of this room. Okay? And our partner biologist, Alicia, cocked her ears, and the rancher said, "What are you listening to?" And she goes, "I'm listening to a wren tit." He goes, "Wren tit, never heard of such thing. What is that?" So she told about the wren tit, told about its life history, that it needed brush for its life history, that it lived in really small regions. And the rancher looked at her and said, "Well," he goes, "we don't want to take that little bird out of the house and home because we better leave some of that brush." So he ended up only taking about 20% of the brush that he intended to take because he wanted to make sure that that bird was taken care of. And we also had a recent event where one of our partner biologists, and I was with her at the time, engaged this rancher. He goes, "I'm tired of you enviros." He goes, "I don't even know why I let you on this land." He goes, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to help me or not. And I said to him, "Oh, I think we're all enviros." I said, "We all like clean air. We all like a safe place for a family. We like reliable food. It's uncontaminated." I said, "I think that's what an enviro is." And he goes, "Yeah," he goes, "I'm not sure I can trust you guys." Fast forward 3 years, new district conservationist, our partner biologist takes out to meet this land. He puts his arm around our partner biologist and said, "We're environmentalists." He goes, "We like to work together." Okay, so again, changing hearts and minds, and we know that what we're doing is really making a difference with these landowners that we work with. And as Leopold said, we end, I think, at what might be called the standard paradox of the 20th century. You can look to the 21st, obviously. Our tools are better than we are. We grow better, faster than they do. They suffice to crack the atom, to command the tides, but they do not suffice for the oldest task in human history, to live on a piece of land without spoiling it. And that's our charge. So with that, I want to thank our sponsors. We are a nonprofit, so we have to go to different donors and sponsors and funders. Several of them are in this room. And if we have time, we'll take a question.
Great. We have time for 2 questions before announcements and lunch. Thank you so much. Question over on this side of the room. First hand that shot up. Hold on just a sec. I'll come to you.
Hello, Nancy. My question is are you only focusing on California land, or are you going like all over 2 states?
Good question. Right now we're in California, except we have one county, Washoe County, in northwestern Nevada. We want to export our model. That's why we're here today, is so we can let people know what we're doing. We want to give away our partner biologist model. We want to give away our Leopoldian land steward model. We want to give away our Rangeland Monitoring Network model as well. So we're really interested in having conversations, again, a roundtable tomorrow and Friday morning. Really interested in getting a little bit deeper. We're only able to kind of glide across the top of some of the high points of what we're doing. So we do want to see if we can start, a bit of a green fire in the rest of the country.
Anybody on the side in the back? Let's go to the back. The world needs to hear what you're going to say, or ask rather.
Can you give an example of getting your foot in the door or your boot on the ground in a county, and maybe 2 examples of how that worked for you?
Yeah, it was an intention to get into the NRCS field offices. Being an old NRCS employee, I know that one of the strengths of the organization is that they have trust among landowners that's not enjoyed by a lot of other state and federal agencies. So that trust is something that we have parlayed. We have yet to knock on a door. Most of the producers come in to talk to us. There's several producers that don't want to work with the government, they don't want to work with the NRCS, but they still come to us and seek us out and ask us to come out and give them technical assistance on their property. So the trust building is a huge part of it. And we do that through some of our community activity. I like to use our partner biologist in Susanville. Her name is Tiffany Russell. When you walk into the local brew pub, it's like Norm and Cheers walking in. Tiffany! Everybody knows her because she works with the fair, she works with the land trust, she works with Cattlemen's Association, she works with BLM, she works with all these different people. She really is, in a way, she's really like a community organizer because she really draws people into her. And she's a really good example of what our partner biologists do in the communities where they live.
Great, thank you so much. Everyone give it a round of applause for Wendell Gilgert.